Thanks for joining me today. I am going to show you how to make a mug cozy for your favorite mug when you are sipping hot cocoa on a cold winter day. Here are the items that you're going to need for this craft. A pair of scissors, a piece of chalk, a piece of felt that is 2 inches by 1 inch wide, a button, an embroidery needle and embroidery floss, a yarn ball the color of your choice, 2 knitting needles, and a measuring tape. So I have already gone and measured my favorite mug. You take the end of your measuring tape and you place it right before your handle begins, not underneath, and then you go all the way around and you stop just before you hit the side of the handle. So that's about 11 inches. I'm going to do 10.5 inches for this project. This should fit your standard mug, and it's a good size to do with your students. When you are doing this project with your students, I recommend casting on for them, especially if they have never knit before. And I'm going to show you how to cast on as well. You begin by making a slip knot, and you're going to take one of your needles and slip it into the loop. You now notice that you have 2 ends of yarn, a short end and the long end that's connected to your yarn ball. To avoid confusion, I like to trim my tail and just get rid of that. We are going to cast on 4 stitches and knit for about 10.5 inches, which is the measurement that we got from our mug. To cast on, you take the tail of yarn connected to your yarn ball, place it in the center of your hand. You're going to then close your bottom 3 fingers and wrap the yarn around your thumb and behind your index finger. Your bottom 3 fingers should be secure enough to hold your yarn, but not tight enough so that your yarn doesn't move at all. We are going to begin the casting on of our stitches. I take the tip of my needle and place it right at the yarn that is under my thumb, and you can see the yarn is moving because my fingers are giving it the space to move. And then I'm going to take the tip of my needle and grab the other yarn that's under my index finger. While I'm doing that, a little loop is forming and I let go of what was attached to my fingers. Let's see that again. Wrap it around your thumb and index finger. Take the part underneath your thumb, and the part underneath your index finger, let go, and we now have 2 stitches cast on. Let's do the next part. The needles that I'm using are thicker, so they make bigger holes and your knitting goes a little faster. But it's okay if you have thinner needles when you are doing this with your students. So I think 4 stitches is enough for this project. When we are knitting in the classroom, we want to make sure that the rhyme that we use is pretty clear to our students. So the yarn rhyme that we use is in through the front door, run around back, peek through the window, off jumps Jack. All of the lines from that rhyme have an intention, and I will explain that now. So in whatever hand is your non-dominant hand, you'll place the needle with your stitches, and we'll see that we have 5 loops that we're going to be using. And in my right hand, I have my bare needle. I like to tell my students that they should point up their index fingers as if they were at their favorite sports team game so that they can cheer their team on. And those fingers are going to be protecting their stitches. So I'm placing my needle inside the first loop and I'm forming an X with my needle. Can you see this? This is the first part of our rhyme in which we say in through the front door. We take our yarn that is connected to our yarn ball, run around back, bring the yarn in between the two needles, protect it with our finger so it doesn't come off, peek through the window, which is right here in this space, peek through the window, off jumps Jack. We're going to take our index finger and pull that extra off. As you get used to doing this, you'll find that some stitches feel tighter than others. The more you do it, the more you can decide how you want to create that distance between your needles so that your stitches are not so tight or loose. In through the front door, run around back, peek through the window, off jumps Jack. If it's hard for you to remember the rhyme, or for your students to remember the rhyme, I recommend printing out or writing or posting the expression of the poem to a wall where your kids can see it. In through the front door, run around back, peek through the window, off jumps Jack. In through the front door, run around back, peek through the window, protect your stitches, off jumps Jack. And you can see it's already starting to form. Now I'm going to switch hands and do the process again until I have about 10.5 inches worth of stitches. This may be frustrating for some students, so it's important to be patient and to give them any tips that you have. For example, my tips about the index fingers can be very helpful. If you want to rest the needles on the table, or when they're knitting, you can recommend to rest the non-sharp ends of the needles on their tummies. I really like how multicolored yarn looks when knitting, but kids can use a solid color when doing this as well. And because we did not cast on too many stitches, and because I'm using a wider set of needles, it won't really take too much time to achieve the length of the 10.5 inches. And feel free to experiment with different lengths as well. So I have just finished knitting about 10.5 inches worth of yardage, and I cut my yarn off of the yarn ball to equal a little bit longer than the length of my knitting. To cast off, what we're going to do is insert our needle and cast on a stitch so that it attaches to our needle, and do that one more time. This appears just like knitting a regular stitch, but now what we do is we insert the needle into the loop closest to you, and we're going to slip the second loop through the first one. We've now cast off our first stitch. Let's see that again. We're going to insert the needle in through the first loop, jump off, and we're going to insert the second loop through the first loop, kind of like trading places. Stick the needle into the next loop, and trade or switch places again. And you can begin to see a sort of chain stitch forming over here. And we only have 2 more to cast off. Again, this can look just like regular knitting. So if you need to practice a few times, I highly recommend that. Now when it comes to the last two, you're going to repeat what we've been doing. Trade places. And you can see we are now all the way at the other end, whereas before we began at this corner. What you can do now is take your end of yarn and slip it through the loop. Take your needle out and you can make a small knot here. If you'd like to do two, go ahead. You can even take a tapestry needle and weave your yarn through the last row if you'd like. I always prefer to secure two knots at the last corner, tug, and snip it off. Be sure to not snip through the knot. And we have our knitting. I'm going to put my needles off to the side and locate a few things. So I've threaded a needle and I'm going to take my button and my felt. We are going to create a little clasp so that we can attach this to our mug easily. So I will take this end, doesn't matter which end really, and place the button in between, an equal distance between the two ends. And I will take my needle and come in through the back, through the holes of the button, and stitch the button on. There are different techniques to sew on a button. I like to do a crisscross because I think it looks very cute. I'll follow wherever I came in across to the other hole, directly across from it, and I'll pull all the way. I'll come in through the back to the holes that have not been sewn through and form another X. This can be a little confusing for kids if they haven't sewn on a button, because they might do what's called a loop-de-loop, in which they take their needle and go back in through the top, whereas they should be always coming in through the back so that you can't really see any more thread or embroidery floss other than what is supposed to be shown, which is a tiny little X. After we've sewn that, you can do a balloon knot. So you would take your needle, find a piece of the floss, go underneath the floss but not through the button and not through the yarn, and pull until you have a small balloon shaped loop. Now we have to pop the balloon. I always joke with my students and even some adults that it helps if you make the pop noise when sticking the needle in through the loop. Pull tightly and feel free to do it one more time so that this lasts. Pop the needle and pull. Now I'm ready to cut the embroidery floss off. Because we're going to use this again, make sure that you tie a knot at the end of your floss. This is what it should look like over here when it's done being sewn. I'm going to then grab my chalk and my 2" by 1" rectangle of felt, and you can see that I have made a little marking with the chalk, and I'll show you how I found that. So you place the rectangle next to the button, and you want to do about a button's width in find that spot and make a very small mark that is less than the width of the button. Now what I do is fold this in half long ways, take my scissor and make the tiniest snip with the tip of my scissors. Now you'll notice that it's a lot smaller than my button. If you want to test if that's the right fit, simply before you sew this on to the other end of your knitting, practice slipping the button through. If it's too small, the button won't go through, so you can make the stitch a bit bigger on either end of your slit. Let's see how that fits. Much better. Perfect, actually. So what we'll do now is we'll come to the other end of our knitting and lay it out long ways. Whatever side the button is facing up is where you will then place the rectangle of felt. So I'll place it so it's overlapping a tiny bit. And we are going to now stitch on a running stitch with our threaded needle. And you can see it's overlapping by quite a bit. Knit yardage does stretch, so this is going to work in our favor when attaching this to the felt. Stick the needle in through the back, and pull through the felt. We're going to go down into the fabric, through the yarn. And I chose a color that would contrast with my felt because I think it looks very pretty. You can do the same color if you'd like, but this is already a very colorful mug cozy, so why not? We'll stick the needle in through the back, pull all the way, make another stitch, pull down through the felt, and back. Continue in from the back until you have just a few stitches left to complete. In through the back, up through the felt, down from the top into the back of the felt. You can see we have 4 stitches. What we'll do in the back is we will find the closest stitch of embroidery floss, stick our needle in through the back until we have a balloon shape, pop the balloon, and pull tightly. You can do this one more time so that it's secure. Pop and pull. We will now cut this off and attach it to our mug. Talk about a perfect fit. Now, if any of your students have a cozy that is too big, because this stretches, what you can do is always accommodate by cutting the felt, pinching it together. It's not too difficult of a solution. And now you have your very own cozy for your favorite mug. Enjoy and happy crafting.